Hello everyone, first news update for 4th of May. Now it's about 12 o'clock, middle of the day by Moscow time, and I have prepared quite a number of news on some major developments that Russian media and public paid attention to, and I hope you will find this episode informative and useful. And if so, please, dear friends, don't forget to click that like button and leave some commentary on both platforms, on YouTube and Rumble, no matter where you are watching or listening this video. And if you can, please switch from YouTube channel to my Rumble channel and watch this episode there. That will be very helpful to further develop my Rumble channel. It only takes like a couple of seconds. Link to my Rumble is under this video in description box and in the pinned comment on every YouTube video basically, or almost everyone. And this is my Rumble page, by the way, that you see right now on your screen. Lately, as you notice, probably I started promoting my Rumble channel more energetically, and there is some results already there. View numbers actually increased, maybe a little bit, but still it is a progress, isn't it? And with your help, maybe some of my updates will go viral on Rumble, and bigger Rumble community will see it, or maybe Rumble platform will promote some of my videos if they will have more likes and comments, and well, channel might grow significantly in that case, of course. And also, dear friends, when it comes to announcements, let me tell you that today I will publish on my Patreon and Boosty pages video from a rehearsal of a Victory Day parade. Yesterday afternoon and late evening, I was filming in central Moscow. All these armored vehicles, missiles, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, multi-launch rocket systems, and so on, that will participate in Victory Parade. And I'm okay with content, with video, and after I will do little montage, I will publish that video today on my Patreon and Boosty pages. And if you are interested, dear friends, to see some extra content that I have on regular basis on my Patreon channel or Boosty channel, and simultaneously if you want to support my work and this project that I'm working on, then please consider to subscribe to my Patreon page or page on Boosty. I'm sharing on both platforms same content. Links are also under this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. And before I start news update, let me also notice that this evening at 7 o'clock we will have a traditional community chat live stream on YouTube, and I hope members of our community will manage to join their conversation. It is always good fun and always interesting to have exchange of opinions in real time. So I expect to see many members of our community during the live stream. Okay, that's being said, let's go through some news now. And first of all, of course, I will share with you this report that all the media outlets here in Russia and potentially outside of the Western world did pay attention to, which is that Zelensky actually threatened the world leaders ahead of Moscow's Victory Day celebration. So Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky has warned, and this is at least second threat from him personally, and his administration, his inner circle is going viral, by the way, wild, absolutely wild. Yermak, aide of Zelensky, also issued some threats against Russia, against Moscow and their guests and the locals that will celebrate Victory Day. So absolutely wild story there. So Ukraine's leader, so-called leader Vladimir Zelensky, has warned that Kiev cannot guarantee the safety of the world leaders attending the May 9th celebration in Moscow. Clearly indirect threat, right? And sort of warning that don't go in Moscow because something might, we might do something there, something might happen. He also dismissed Russia's proposal for Victory Day ceasefire as a theatrical production. I mean, he don't care about citizens of this former Soviet Republic, Ukraine, right? So he did not agree on 3-day ceasefire. No surprises. No surprises there. We have some quotes that I can give you, but Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier, as you know, announced unilateral 3-day pause in military operations starting May 8 and continuing through their World War II Victory Day celebrations. Citing humanitarian reasons, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov described their move as a potential start of direct negotiations with Kiev without preconditions. Kiev, however, has demanded a 30-day unconditional ceasefire instead, which is a non-starter, obviously, because the Russian foreign minister, during his interview with one of the US media outlets, it was ABC or CBS, just last week, clearly stated that if the West wants, or the Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky wants this 30-day ceasefire to basically reorganize itself, rearm itself, and get ready better for terrorist activity that they do against Russia, then of course Moscow cannot agree on that, right? Although Moscow is open for serious talks, meaningful talks, and to achieve meaningful talks, obviously certain steps have to be made by Kiev regime, and when it comes to and its Western backers, and when it comes to ceasefire itself, there should be some mechanisms to make sure that ceasefire actually works, right? Front line is about 2,000 kilometers. How this front line gonna be controlled if, let's say, Moscow agree on this 30-day unconditional ceasefire proposal that was originated in White House, as far as I remember, initially, right? Who is controlling line of contact? Is there any talks in the White House or in the Washington or other Western capitals or in Kiev about mechanisms? No, nothing in the place, nothing is implemented that will help to actually monitor the situation. So all these talks on part of West about 30-day ceasefire is clearly just an attempt to divert public's attention and to generate anti-Russian hysteria again and again. That's all it is. It's not serious moves on part of the West. Let's continue anyway. Speaking at the press briefing on Saturday, Zelensky reiterated this position. It is, and we have quote here, it is impossible to build any plan for next steps to end the war in 2 or 3 days, and so it just does not look very serious. It's more of a theatrical production on his part, he said, referring to Putin as cited by Interfax Ukraine. And also, quote, no one is going to help Putin play this in order to give him a softer atmosphere of escape from isolation on May 9th. Goodness me, man. And to make everyone feel comfortable and safe. Those leaders, friends or partners of Putin who will come to Kremlin Square, we are either at war or Putin is showing that he is ready for a ceasefire, Zelensky added. He claimed some crazy nonsensical statements on part of Zelensky. He and his Western masters still continue to push this absolutely false narrative that somehow Russia is isolated or Putin is isolated. What a nonsense, by the way, to continue push this narrative now in May 2025, when all sane people worldwide know perfectly well that if anyone is isolated from the world is collective West countries, that the rest of the world is hates now, literally hates, right? And what to say about Zelensky and his criminal regime, by the way, that no one even considers as a humans, no more, because of their ruthless terrorist attacks and terrorist activities and sacrifices that they are making of their own fellow citizens to somehow gain support of the globalists and the Western ruling class in general. And they sacrifice millions of people, by the way, right? Millions of people that were killed, wounded, or forced to flee this quasi-state, Ukraine, right? Unbelievable stuff there. Zelensky also claimed that Kiev is ready to declare a ceasefire at any time, provided both sides agree that it will last for at least 30 days. This is not happening, by the way. Moscow was very clear that Russia will not play these games with their collective West. We all know for what purposes West will use this 30-day ceasefire if Moscow would agree on that. They will send as much money and their weapons as they can during that time and try to reorganize Kiev regime's forces that been beaten and beaten hard, right, in many directions, all along the front line, basically, right? And they desperately need some break. One should keep that in mind, that Kiev regime's forces desperately need some break. And Russia cannot give them this break. And that's why many people here in Russia are not comfortable even with this 3-day or 72-hour ceasefire during their Victory Day celebration, because everyone understands perfectly well Kiev regime will not hold, will not honor this ceasefire. They are not even agree on a ceasefire. And over that, more than that, Zelensky is threatening, and Zelensky and his criminal associates are threatening Russia and guests of Russia that they might do something or some terrorist activity in Moscow and other places during the Victory Day celebration. So I can see argument on part of my fellow citizens that are against even this 3-day ceasefire, right? Anyways, obviously Russian high-ranking officials reacted on these terrorist threats from Zelensky. And for example, let's go through this news. Vladimir Zelensky has turned into an international blackmailer and a terrorist. Grigory Karasin, head of the Federation Council International Committee, told RIA Novosti, commenting on Ukraine's refusal to agree to a ceasefire during the celebration of the 80th anniversary of victory. And well, I was saying this for how long now, that Zelensky is a terrorist, right? And all that regime in Kiev is a terrorist regime and should be declared, designated by Moscow as such, which unfortunately did not yet happen. Certain elements from Zelensky's regime have been designated as terrorists, but not regime itself. Not these so-called state institutions like main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's defense ministry have not been designated as terrorist organization. So-called defense ministry of Ukraine have not been designated as terrorist organizations, although it definitely should be designated as such. After all, we all know how many crimes they committed in a Kursk salient area, for example, when they were killing civilians, committing terrorist acts of terror on internationally recognized territory of Russian Federation. And what about terrorist activity that Kiev regime so-called defense ministry committed from 2014 and 2022, while they killed over 10,000 civilians in Donbass? Is that not enough reason to designate this so-called institution as a terrorist organization? Of course it is. Of course it is. SBU of Ukraine also should be designated as terrorist organization. Am I correct? Of course. Of course. SBU and the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine were engaged in dozens of terrorist attacks on Russian territory and against civilians. It's factual, right? It's factual. So entire regime in Kiev should be designated as terrorist organization and dealt as Russia is dealing with the terrorists. But for whatever reason, for political or I don't know, it's beyond my understanding. Moscow did not yet take this step. Maybe Moscow will have no option soon but to designate Kiev regime actually as a terrorist organization. But for now, unfortunately, it was not done. While high-ranking officials publicly acknowledging terrorist nature of that regime, and that's exactly what Grigory Karasin is saying, isn't it? That Zelensky and his regime basically has turned into an international blackmailer and a terrorist. It's true, it's just factual. Also, by the way, Dmitry Medvedev, former Russian president and current deputy chairman of the Security Council, reacted on these threats from Zelensky, threats of terrorist attacks on Russia during the Victory Day celebration, guests of Russia and locals. And he was much stronger in his words, Medvedev. So he threatened back Zelensky with consequences in case of attack on Moscow on Victory Day. So Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, reacted sharply to Vladimir Zelensky's refusal to agree to a 3-day ceasefire and threats to the guests at the parade, guests of Russia at the parade in Moscow in honor of their 80th anniversary of victory. Medvedev drew attention to Zelensky's words that Ukrainian authorities cannot guarantee the safety of the world leaders who will come to Moscow on May 9. Who is looking for his guarantees? Medvedev is asking. Just a verbal provocation, nothing more. Well, maybe there is something behind these threats, by the way, and who knows, maybe in upcoming days, Kiev regime, this Western-backed terrorist regime, will actually commit terrorist attacks on Russia, including on Moscow, in mass scale. So these threats should be taken seriously because Zelensky's regime already proved that they are very much capable of committing such terrorist acts, right? But anyways, let's see what Medvedev is saying. Medvedev also added that Zelensky understands that in the event of a real provocation on Victory Day, no one can guarantee that May 10 will come in Kiev. So quite a strong words from Medvedev, but yet again, I don't think Zelensky or anybody among Zelensky's backers in globalist camp or their in the leadership of globalist puppet regimes in London, Paris, Berlin, and elsewhere really care about strong statements from Moscow. Because one may argue, why on earth Zelensky is even still around? Or how come that practically entire leadership of this terrorist regime is still around and are leading terrorist activities against Russia? So this statement from Medvedev that if Zelensky's regime commits some terrorist attacks on Victory Day, May 10 might not come to Kiev. It sounds stronger, yes, but there was already too many strong statements from Moscow, and unfortunately, because there were no following steps, quite often after those statements, hardly anyone in the collective Western countries and their puppet regimes of the globalists, hardly anyone there is taking seriously all these strong statements from Russia anymore, if they ever did, actually. But yes, public figures here in Russia, high-ranking officials, did pay attention to these threats, and even though Medvedev is kind of trying to downgrade the risks, I would take these threats seriously. And I'm quite sure Russian security services are doing exactly that. And they will do their best to make sure that citizens of the Russian Federation and guests of the Russia will be safe and secure during their Victory Day celebrations and every other day. And that's what they do, by the way. They work 24/7 to prevent dozens and dozens, hundreds actually, of terrorist attacks that Kiev regime and its NATO backers are planning on Russian soil. Meanwhile, we have this report here that Kremlin has announced that a program of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow will include signing number of documents. So during the talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Moscow, package of documents is planned to be signed, the Kremlin's press service reported, and according to preliminary data, Xi Jinping will arrive in Moscow in Russia on 7th of May and will stay here until 10th of May. So, Chinese leader clearly is not the one that can be threatened by Zelensky or some other rabid animals that are chained, basically, that are like chained dogs for globalists. They're not going to threaten Chinese leader for sure, and he is definitely coming to Moscow, and there are many other leaders also, by the way. many other leaders are also coming to Moscow. There were speculations that maybe leaders of Serbia and Slovakia, due to pressure from Brussels and the globalists, will refuse to come to Moscow. There was some coincidence that both leaders, Slovakian Prime Minister Roberto Fico and Serbian President Vučić, Alexander Vučić, felt ill exactly these days. I mean, maybe really coincidence, maybe they really did not feel good, but rumors start circulating that they are using this narrative that they don't feel well to avoid visiting Moscow, although they earlier promised that they will do it. Maybe this is the case, by the way. Maybe these rumors have ground. We will find out in a couple of days' time, but we all know that Brussels and globalists were very mad that number of leaders from Europe. In case of Fico, it's a European Union. In case of Serbia's Vučić, this is a European country, Central European country actually. There, globalists were mad that these people were planning to visit Moscow during the Victory Day celebration, and maybe they had enough leverage over these individuals that they forced them to come up with this narrative that they feel they are ill now. They don't feel well, so therefore they cannot come to Moscow. Maybe this is just acting. I don't know, but according to some reports, Finance Minister of Serbia stated that Vučić will go to Moscow anyways. So maybe these rumors are just nothing but the rumors. Yet again, we will find out soon. At least what is known for now is that Prime Minister of India will be unable to come to Moscow due to escalation between India and Pakistan. And I mean, everyone understands that unfortunately situation between these two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan, is deteriorating on daily basis. And later on in this update, I'll give you some additional information on that. But rest of the leaders, world leaders that already stated that they will come to Moscow, most likely will come to Moscow. Only at this point, what I know is that India's Prime Minister Modi just would not be able to come, which is understandable. India and Pakistan are on the edge of all-out war, so Prime Minister has to stay in India. Meanwhile, by the way, today video starts circulating on internet of episode of interview of Vladimir Putin to Pavel Zarubin, Russian journalist that are constantly in touch with the Russian president and does weekly programs about activity of the president. And so interesting statements were made by president during this talk. So Russia does not need to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. That's what Putin said. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that there is no need for Russia to resort to nuclear weapons in the conflict with Ukraine. He said Russia has enough forces and resources to bring the conflict in Ukraine to conclusion on its own terms. And yes, Russia, I agree with the Russian president that her country definitely has enough forces and resources to bring this conflict to the end on Russian terms. And that's exactly what is going to happen. That's for sure. There can be no doubts about it. But I am personally, as one citizen of Russian Federation, strongly disagree with Russian president on topic of nuclear weapons. I think nuclear weapons should be deployed on in the very first minutes of the beginning of special military operation. And after that, there was at least several occasions when Russia had every reason to deploy nuclear weapons. And if I was Russian president, I will definitely do that, 100%. That's why we need nukes, by the way. These nukes are not just for nothing, right? And, if it was up to me, and I am quite sure vast majority, maybe not vast majority, but many people here in Russia would agree with me that nukes should be deployed on the very first minutes of the special military operation. And I'm not saying that nukes should be used against even military formations of the Kiev regime or their infrastructure or anything like that. No, What I'm saying is that if Russia, on very first minutes of the special military operation, deployed a couple of nukes in some unpopulated forestry areas of this former Soviet Republic in the name of Ukraine, that will, and then simultaneously send public message to the rest of the world that even if single bullet will cross the border with this republic from any other countries, those countries are next. I'm quite sure none of their NATO member states would dare to do what they did during this proxy war against Russia. They would not dare to actually engage in this proxy war this directly. And conflict would be ended in a week, maybe in a couple of days, really. If Russia deployed nukes as a strongest possible warning to NATO member states, to globalists, to Western ruling class, that you send even a single bullet from whichever country into this so-called Ukraine and you all are dead. You are next. That message would definitely reach its adressate, and I'm 100% convinced, by the way, that those psychos that are in charge of collective West would not dare to further provoke Russia, because they love to live, by the way. They love their rich life, those so-called elites in the West, right? And they would not jeopardize their position. They are not suicidal. They may be crazies and capable of many, many atrocities, but they love themselves, right? They love life. They would not risk it. So that's why I disagree with the Russian president that, nukes should be out of conversation. No, nukes should be in the conversation. And, in my personal opinion, nukes should be deployed on the very first minutes of the special military operation. That would save hundreds of thousands of lives. On both sides, by the way. And one should keep in mind that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that were killed in Ukrainian uniform, by the way, were forcefully mobilized residents of that quasi-state, right? That did not really wanted to end up in the trenches and to be sacrificed for geopolitical agenda of the West. Nothing to be said about tens of thousands of Russian citizens that died during this conflict, which still continues, right? So yes, I have a very different take when it comes to nuclear weapons compared to Russian president. But yet again, I am just a regular citizen here in Russia, ordinary citizen, while Vladimir Putin is in charge, right? And it's up to him to decide. And he is supported by vast majority of public here in Russia, and therefore, I guess they all are correct, and I'm wrong, maybe. But still, I have my own position on this matter. TASS News Agency, meanwhile, is reporting that, share your take, dear friends, what you think on this topic. I did share my take. TASS News Agency, meanwhile, is reporting that Spiegel, according to Spiegel, German media outlet, I believe that is, Trump issued an ultimatum to NATO countries. The American side has threatened that U.S. President Donald Trump may not attend the NATO summit in The Hague in June this year if the allies in Europe do not increase their defense spending, their Spiegel magazine reported. According to this news outlet, U.S. President representative to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, demands that European countries agree to increase defense spending to 5% of their GDP at almost every meeting in Brussels. At first, the Germans thought that the Americans did not seriously mean spending 5%, that it was just a negotiating tactic. Now they take Whitaker at his word, and when he threatens that Trump will remain on the sideline of the June summit if there is no movement on the money issue from other NATO countries, he been listened by Europeans. Earlier Reuters, European so-called elites, by the way, Earlier, Reuters reported, citing diplomatic sources in their alliance, that NATO Security General Mark Rutte would propose to Trump a two-stage plan for increasing NATO countries' military spending from their current 2% to 5% of GDP by the summit in The Hague. If the plan is accepted by the United States and then approved at the summit at the end of June, it would become their new target for the alliance states instead of their current 2%. And so, okay, I don't know how serious these sources of Spiegel are, that Trump might stay out of NATO summit, upcoming NATO summit, if EU countries, or if NATO countries that are basically EU countries also wouldn't agree to spend 5% of their GDP on militaries. But point is that not all EU member states can afford to spend 5% of their GDPs, because in many cases that will mean doubling or tripling their defense spendings. And a number of high-ranking officials in Germany, for example, were terrified by this prospect of increasing spending up to 5%, because in that case they have to cut almost all social programs, because Germany just has no money for it, right? Germany cannot afford this level of spending, 5% of GDP. In money volume, it will amount to 250 billion or something like that. It's a huge money, by the way, right? And if Germany is struggling to reach this 5% target, then what about other countries, other economies that are much weaker, right? Much weaker than Germany's economy. So therefore, I'm not quite sure that this 5% target is actually doable, at least in case of major European economies. I mean, smaller economies like Chihuahua states in the Baltics and others, I mean, they might at least, they might at least make some statements that, oh, they will do this, and they will then borrow money from other European countries or other NATO countries to actually finance this 5% of GDP, because their GDP is just tiny, right? What kind of GDP Estonia gonna have, by the way? Like 100 billion, 200 billion? I don't know, right? Or Lithuania or Latvia, by the way. This is our deserted areas, right? Deserted areas from where youngsters run away for generations, by the way. Since collapse of the Soviet Union, young generation is running away from these Baltic states. And the only ones who remain are either elderly people that cannot go anywhere or would not go because they just are too old for that, or their bureaucratic class and their offsprings, right? That's all, really. Anyways, we will find out soon, but this 5% demand from White House is a bit too much for major economies in Europe, that's for sure. Meanwhile, dear friends, also interesting news in regards to US, Trump, White House. So, a Domestic Policy Council of White House, head of Domestic Policy Council, Vince Haley, has officially confirmed that President Donald Trump is planning a large-scale military parade in Washington, D.C. on June 14, coinciding with the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army and Trump's own 79th birthday. The event is set to feature 6,600 troops, 150 military vehicles, 50 helicopters, 7 army bands, reenactors from U.S. military history. Defense Secretary Pat Hegseth called it the biggest and most beautiful military parade in the nation's history. So, yes, seems like Trump is going ahead with a military parade. And okay, I mean, nothing wrong with military parades, by the way. I don't have any negative feelings about this. Here in Russia, and during the Soviet Union, there was a tradition to hold military parades which still continues, right? And there are people, many people, by the way. It's not just to honor. In our case, it's not just to honor heroes of that fought and won great patriotic war, but also this parade is a demonstration of strength of the country, and many people worldwide enjoying, not just locals, but also worldwide, they are enjoying to watch these parades. And yesterday, by the way, when I was filming rehearsal of Victory Day parade in central parts of Moscow, you know, if you are a Patreon member of the community, or boosting member, you will see there was a sea of people, spectators. There was a sea of spectators, by the way, that were waiting for hours to actually see with their own eyes all these moving military vehicles and all that stuff. So, you know, I have no issues with military parades, but I don't know about US public. Maybe they are not used to it and they might consider it excessive waste of resources. It's up to them, really. But parade most likely will take place in US, in Washington DC, on June 14, when it's going to be quite a big one, because 150 military vehicles, that's quite a lot, isn't it? 600 military personnel, dozens of helicopters, probably planes will, fighter jets will also participate, bomber planes. So it's going to be a big event. Anyways, let's continue with some more news. And Renault is reporting that Romania is holding second presidential elections in 6 months. Polling stations for voting their presidential elections have opened in all populated areas of Romania. Citizens of the country elect their head of state once every 5 years. There is no turnout threshold. Any voting is considered valid with any number of participants. And by the way, even though Georgescu, during the first elections 6 months ago, that was cancelled, Georgescu was hammered by globalists and their puppet regime in Romania. According to reports, another main candidate from opposition is leading their ratings again. So what might happen is that after these elections, when votes are counted, globalists and their puppet regime in Romania may cancel these results also. And this is not an exaggeration at all. If globalists will not see their own candidate winning, most likely they will cancel these results of this election. And when it comes to elections, by the way, also interesting news is coming from UK that Farage's party is making big gains in the local British elections. So the right-wing Reform UK party has won 677 out of more than 1,600 seats in England's local elections, while the Labour and the Conservative parties suffer rather heavy defeats across the country. As a result, results began to trickle in on Friday, the party led by Firebrand and their Brexit proponent Nigel Farage emerged as the strongest performer in contests held in 23 local authorities across England, winning control of 10 councils. This includes 8 taken from the Conservatives, Derbyshire, Kent, Lancashire, Lincolnshire, Northam, I am not going to pronounce all this, Staffordshire, Nottinghamshire, and rest. And also from Labours were taken Doncaster and Durham, where no party previously had a majority. So, I mean, success. Anyways, it's a success for Nigel Farage's party. Reform also won hard-fought parliamentary by-elections in Rancombe and Helsby, snatching victory from Labour by just 6 votes after a count. As a result, the party now controls 5 seats in the UK Parliament. According to BBC projection, if general election were held today, Reform UK would receive 30% of the vote, ahead of Labour's that are at 20% currently, and the Conservatives that are at 15%. However, the next general election is not due to until May 2029. So, well, somewhat surprising for Farage's party. And well, if people in England, and these local elections were held in England, which is obviously part of United Kingdom. And well, big victory for Reform Party. Who knows? Maybe in upcoming years, by the way. Maybe not necessarily in 2029 when next parliamentary election is gonna take place, but maybe next decade also. Some alternative parties that being created by figures like Farage will actually replace traditional parties, Labours, Conservatives, New Labours, and so on, that are basically uniparty at this point, right? So I don't know. I will say this is a good news for people of England, because whatever is disliked by globalists is a good news for people everywhere, I think, because globalists are existential, and their puppet regimes are existential threat for humanity. That's what I'm convinced of, 1,000,000%. Meanwhile, dear friends, Telegram, I did share this morning on my Telegram short video of interview of RT with the Pakistani ambassador in Russia, and you know, some highlights from this interview is that nuclear warning from Pakistan is issued to India. A diplomat says that Islamabad could use nukes in case of war with New Delhi. Pakistan will use full spectrum of power, both conventional and nuclear. Ambassador to Russia tell the RT, and well, I can actually.
Well, when it comes
it's
to
20 seconds, by the way, so let's listen to Ambassador of Pakistan.
When it comes to India and Pakistan, do not get involved into this debate of full spectrum of strength. Both conventional in Pakistan will use the full spectrum of power, both conventional and nuclear. And I'll stop there.
So it's serious stuff, isn't it? It's serious stuff, and I don't know. Let's hope it will not come to all-out war between the two countries, because I mean, they might actually use nukes, by the way. And I said a few times before, isn't it, that according to some scientific research, if a full-scale nuclear exchange will take place between India and Pakistan, that would be absolute devastation, humanly speaking, obviously, for human civilization, because potentially tens of millions of people might die. But it will be, if anyone thinks that this conflict will, you know, be just in that part of the region and the rest of the world would not be attached to it, this is wrong, because yet again, according to some scientific research, if full-scale nuclear exchange will take place between India and Pakistan, that might be well enough to provoke a nuclear winter, which will, on its terms, then will destroy modern world and human civilization as we know it, with its absolutely devastating consequences. So let's hope this is just a talks, just a threats or tactics in the negotiations, and it will not come to a real full-out war between these two countries, by the way, because it is extremely dangerous. And Russian foreign minister, according to reports that I see this morning, spoke with the foreign minister of India, Jai Shankar. Of course, Russian side expressed hope that New Delhi and Islamabad will manage to de-escalate. Obviously, I don't have to explain that Russia is a strategical partner of India and will support India whenever is needed, isn't it? But as a friend, Russia, of course, is recommending both sides, India and Pakistan, to de-escalate. Also, breaking news for this morning, dear friends, that Houthi rebels or Ansar Allah movement in Yemen, which is also known as Houthi rebels, launched missiles towards Israel, and one of the missiles actually landed in Ben Gurion Airport vicinity, international airport vicinity, and this is a video of that, by the way. I mean, this is a video that starts circulating on internet. Moment of arrival of the missile, and on a point of impact, there is some 25-meter wider crater. About 6 people, according to latest information, 6 people were wounded as a result of this strike. And the Israeli leadership, including defense ministry, is threatening with retaliatory strikes. Now, when I posted this video, by the way, of Houthi missile hitting Ben Gurion Airport, one of the members of community commented that probably this is a fake video, although I saw it on RT, so therefore I didn't really have doubts that video is genuine. But we should, we should always keep in mind that nowadays with AI technologies and so on, it is quite easily done by certain groups to make a fake video. But in this particular case, this is genuine video. This is another video, by the way, of smoking coming out from impact side. And as I already said, Israeli leadership, 6 people at least were wounded as a result of this strike, and Israeli leadership is threatening now with retaliation. So yes, I mean, there is reports already in the media. RIA Novosti also is reporting that Israel was disproportional response to Ben Gurion Airport attack. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said that Israel will pay 7-fold for the missile attack on Ben Gurion Airport carried out by the Yemeni Ansar Allah movement, also known as Houthi rebels. And dear friends, and question is also, dear friends, when it comes to this particular story, US and its allies are bombing Ansar Allah movement for how long now? This bombing campaign started during the Biden's administration, isn't it? And Trump's administration is continues to bomb Yemen literally on daily basis. And if you remember, I said straight away that in no circumstances US or any other country for that matter would be able to defeat Houthi rebels, because they were fighting against Saudi Arabia and UAE and their proxies for 9 straight years, by the way, and they come up winning that war, right? And eventually every other and other regional capitals that were engaged in war against them, they were forced to actually sign up for some, ceasefire. And they were forced to turn to political means of dialogue with the Houthis, right? Or Ansar Allah movement. And it was obvious that in no circumstances, the US is going to be able to achieve any other result. But Pentagon probably, or Washington probably, due to their arrogance, had different ideas. They are bombing Yemen for how many months now? God knows how many billions of US taxpayers were spent on that. And what is the result? Houthi rebels are well capable to hit Ben Gurion Airport, international airport in Israel. as a retaliatory measure for Israeli atrocities against Palestine people of Palestine. And the Houthi rebels or Ansar movement is well capable of harassing Navy, US Navy, by the way, in Red Sea or Arabian Sea, right? That's what is happening. Maybe, you know, some adequate people in Trump's administration will tell him to stop these bombing campaigns against Houthis and turn to diplomacy, which might actually work better, much better, in regards to results. I don't know. And I will end this update, dear friends, on this interesting news that Alrosa, Russian giant company in business of diamonds, is auctioning Russia's largest diamond, which has name New Sun. Let me show you a video, by the way, of that diamond. It's a rare colored diamond. So Alrosa plans to sell at her auction the largest diamond in the Russian history, the New Sun, a rare fancy color vivid yellow diamond with a weight over 100 carats. The head of Yakutia, Aysen Nikolaev, reported this to a TASS news agency, and I have no idea how much diamonds costs, but this is unique, quite unique diamond, you know, with unique color and such weight, 100 carats, probably will go on auction for I don't know, tens of millions of dollars, maybe over $100 million. I don't know, but definitely it's something spectacular. I hope some Russian billionaires will buy it. Some Russian billionaire will buy it, and you know, it will stay in Russia, because this is biggest ever diamond that was found in Russia, right? So I'm gonna end this video on that, dear friends. Hopefully you will find this episode informative and useful. And if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary if you did not yet did it. That might help, as I said in the beginning, by the way, that might help to reach wider audience, more likes and comments. If you can, please share video with your friends and also information about existence of my channel that might also help to reach people that might are interested in news from Russia and Russian perspective on certain developments, or pro-Russian, let's say. And dear friends, if you like my work, if you like my channels, and if you think I deserve to be in this field of news and political commentary, please consider to support with donation through PayPal or Boosty platforms, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. All the links are on this video in the description box and in the pinned comment, including crypto address, you know, just in case. Okay, this is it for now. Have a wonderful day. And before I go, let me remind you that at 7 o'clock this evening, Moscow time, live stream on my YouTube channel, live stream and community chat on my YouTube channel. And I hope many of you will manage to join the conversation. This is it for now. Have a wonderful day and take care.